Hey, Bob.
Karen, it is so good to see you. And today is going to be fantastic.
I'm really, really excited for our next guest. So let me do the introduction. So Charlotte Castillo is the managing director of Poderistas, a nonprofit organization launched in 2020 that has become one of the fastest growing and influential digital communities celebrating Latina culture. Charlotte is a seasoned brand builder and hands-on collaborative leader dedicated to building strong, fearless, innovative, and inclusive teams. Before Poderistas, Charlotte was an award-winning senior executive at ViacomCBS for 14 plus years, managing the strategic development, planning, and marketing for all licensing IP, turning well-known properties into billion-dollar global franchises. Think SpongeBob, Paw Patrol, MTV, JoJo Siwa, and so many more. She was also the founding marketing director for Latina magazine and collaborated with top global brands such as Toyota, Unilever, Sony Music, L'Oreal, Netflix, and Amazon. And the list goes on and on. And also, Charlotte, congratulations on becoming a Hope Binational Fellow, which I saw on your
LinkedIn. Congrats.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, Charlotte, it is so good to have you here. What a background. Viacom, Latina Magazine, international work, domestic work. It's wonderful to have you. One of the things that, I thought about you today because I saw a quote. And that quote was like, wow, this is really Charlotte. The quote was, never say you can't do it. Say you haven't done it yet. And I thought about a story I heard you tell recently that happened years ago. I think you were a freelancer and helping with Latina Magazine and organizing a 20 university tour for the magazine to learn what the community needed and to learn how to create resources or content that would engage them. But you didn't do it before. And you said, when someone said, could you do this? Were you like, well, I have it, but I can figure it out. Is that what your career's been like, as you just figured it out? And what did you learn on that particular project? I'm super curious about that.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Bob. And thank you for having me, and nice to meet you guys. And Karen, thank you. Absolutely. I mean, that's a great quote because it literally is exactly how I feel like my career has been. I in college, it's not like I had any idea or any plan, like a master plan of what I was going to do and that I would be here where I'm at now. It's always been this, opportunities have presented themselves and I've been like, okay, I'll figure it out. And then the next one, and I've been like, oh, maybe not. But then I'm like, I'll try. If you believe I can do it, I can do it. So that's kind of been my approach. And has served me well because it has allowed me to try so many different things, right? And obviously you have to have a base of some sort of sense of structure and understanding and process and, all these transferable skills that you can do many jobs. Like I wouldn't say, yes, I can go operate on somebody, but a lot of these jobs are very similar in terms of like thinking about who's the audience and how are you going to attract them and what are you going to offer them, and then at the end of it, what are they going to get back? So in a way, when I think about what that connective tissue of my career has been, is that, right? Like this idea of connecting with consumers, connecting with community, and figuring out how to connect them, how to engage them, and how to continue to keep them engaged. But absolutely, I've always been like, oh, I don't know if I can do that, but I'll try. I'm always like, I can try. I'll figure it out.
That's a really important quality, because just the ability to say, I'll try despite not knowing. Where do you think that comes from? Because that signifies a level of risk taking that you're willing to have. There's also a level of confidence within yourself that you have to have. How did all that come about? I mean, it seems like it started very young.
Absolutely. I think, I think it came from being a very young child, and frankly, being adultified by my non-English speaking parent, right? Mm-hmm. Like my mom and both my parents were immigrants to this country in the late 60s, early 70s from the Dominican Republic. I grew up, I'm born and raised in New York City. But I think, there was a moment where my mom, she became a single parent, right? She left my dad, all that story. But she was like, I need your help. Here, figure this out. I need call Con Edison. I was like 10. I'm like, what do I say? Figure it out. You speak English. Of course you know what to say. Con Edison. Call, speak to the renting agent. I'd be like, we can't pay the rent this month. Tell them. And it was like, okay, like, how can I say no to my mother, right? Like, she didn't have the ability to speak the language, and I did, and I figured it out. Like, I literally just figured out how to do it and thought, okay, this is what she needs me to tell them. This is how I can kind of negotiate. And then, I was trying to be a cute kid as well. So I used all those tools to kind of make it happen early on. And I think that prepared me, in a very kind of fundamental way to just be like, okay, have the confidence and just the idea of like, I can figure this out. I have the tools, the basic tools that I need, and I can figure it out for sure.
Charlotte, it's clear that you had a supportive family. You had your mom, you had your dad, and in those early days when they wanted you to focus on school and not work so you could do well in school, very supportive family. What advice do you have for young professionals, especially in underserved communities, that might not have that supportive family, or that family might be in another country and they're in the US in school? Like what advice do you have for young professionals as they look to build a foundation and network of support?
It's a good question. I mean, I will say my parents were very supportive, giving me like supportive in the, you must go to school, that is your priority, but not like supportive day to day, right? Like they were like, that's your job, you figure it out. They weren't supporting me, helping me with homework. They weren't supporting me navigating the school system. They really weren't. Like I had to do that as well. And it's not because they didn't care, it's just because they were busy. They were working. And I understood that at some level. Like, this is my thing. Like, I got to figure this out. And somehow I always had the hustler gene. I was like, I'm going to get whatever I can get out of this somehow. And I don't know where it came from. I think maybe watching my parents work so hard. So again, yes, supportive, but in other ways I had to fend for myself. But the thing that they gave me that was always like in the back of my mind and was like the message was like, look, we came to this country, right? And this is my story, right? Because I'm a daughter of immigrants, but we came to this country and we're working this hard and we'll always be laborers. We will always work in factories. That's all we can do, right? My dad had aspirations when he came here, actually went to City College and was a math major. He's a math genius, but he had mouths to feed. He had to leave that. He couldn't graduate. So he's like, I couldn't. He's like, but all you have, the only way you're going to elevate, you're going to get out of this kind of working class, poor poverty, frankly. I mean, working poor really is with education. That's all you have. That's all we can give you. It's free. And now it's on you. I mean, and that was drilled into my brain from a very young age. And the expectations, and this is where the support came, although it felt oppressive at the time, but the expectation was that because that's what you're doing, you better excel at it. Like, you get a 90, where are the remaining 10 points? You get a 97, that's yay, but what about 100? I mean, this is not just me being facetious. This is actually how I grew up. And I found an old report card once, not that long ago, looking through some stuff. And literally there was a note on the report card. My teacher, my teacher wrote, oh, great, excellent student. I got like a 95 or something. Excellent work, excellent student. You should be proud. And at that time, you'd have to bring your report card home, and then your parent had to sign it or write something. And my dad wrote back, and so funny because I was like, was I imagining this all these years? Like, no. He wrote back literally like, thank you for saying my daughter's so excellent, but I don't agree, because if she was excellent, she'd have 100. Oh my God. What? So I'm like, okay, this wasn't a figment of my imagination embellishing.
Right.
This was what I grew up with, which, by the way, wonderful. Has its issues that I still work on, but wonderful. But I guess all I'm saying is that I had that, and I had that support, but it was also for students that maybe have parents in another country or don't have the infrastructure. Think of it as your key out. I mean, that's how I thought of it. This is my path. This is the only path that I have out. Literally, full stop. I was always thinking about what else can I get? What else, where else can I travel? Like, I was a voracious reader that I just used to love to read. Nothing fancy, anything I could get my hands on, I'd read. Jackie Collins in an inappropriate time I was reading, but Judy Blume, all of it, magazines, newspapers. But through that reading, I discovered, oh, there's something else out there. There's another world. And I'm like, I want to be part of that world. But I knew that you needed money, you needed access, you needed, and to me, because my parents were saying it, and I realized education is the only way that I'll be able to do that. So again, I think you have to really think about education, networking, and the people that you connect with as tools and access, and providing you access, and internships providing you access and opportunity and exposure, because that exposure will lead to more.
Can we talk a little bit? I mean, there's a lot of resilience in that was developed, right, over those years. And it's a different type of resilience that I think young people experience today, because we're more in this mindset of everybody gets a trophy or needs some level of recognition for minimal work, right?
Yeah.
What would you say to young people when you're talking about that level? Like 95 isn't good enough, right? And then there's also this tipping point of some people don't believe 95 is good enough, but destroy their mental health in some ways to get to that 100. So as we're talking to young people, how do we find that balance to push to that resilience, but also, not to the point of breaking?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. Listen, I have a 15-year-old boy, and in the last year, I've been thinking a lot about this, right? Because part of me is like, success was always also about him, about my child, and giving him more than I had, and giving him access to more things than I had at his age. I mean, he's traveled. We were in Japan this time last year. I barely went across the street when I was his age. And I wanted to give him that. That's part of the work. That's part of success. However, I do think about this all the time. He doesn't have that. I mean, he's wonderful. He's smart. He's all these things. But that grit, sometimes I'm like, he doesn't have that grit, that resilience, because he hasn't had to, right? He's had a lot of things that have been provided to him. And by the way, I've worked hard. I'm, not well off by any means, but definitely relative to my parents, right? Like, I've stepped up in terms of the type of access and the type of resources that I can provide him. And it's a balance, right? Like, because I've tried to push him. And sometimes it doesn't work, or sometimes it, can approach cracking. I think it's about sharing. For me, I tell him stories. Like, I use my story. I use my example. I tell him, well, when I was growing up, this is how, the typical, this is what I had to do. I understand that now it's different. But for me, with him, it's about effort. Like, I really made a shift in the last few years, where I used to be kind of like, I don't know if this is like, the quintessential, they say the tiger mom, like, really, like, I was like that, but I realized that it wasn't working for him. Like, it just wasn't. And I think that there's just more of an awareness of, what kids need now. They have such different circumstances. They have so much exposure to other things like the internet and social media and all the things that are different than we did. And I think has been in some ways detrimental. So I do feel like there needs to be more of a thinking about the social emotional stuff. So now my approach with him is, I'm not as concerned about the grades. I want you to do your best, and I want you to be proud of the work that you're doing. If you're not proud of it, then how can I be proud of it? And by the way, that's what's most important, that you're proud of the work that you're doing, and that you feel like you've done your best, and that you feel you've done everything you can to get the resources, the help, and access you need. And in that, I'm hoping that I'm striking a balance, because it was becoming, he's hard on himself, and part of me is like, that's my doing. But now, really, like, as a parent, you have to reflect. I'm like, oh, that's me. He's really hard on himself. And it's not healthy sometimes, in full, it's just not. And I recognize that, and I tried to course correct, and I think we've reached a balance. And, again, he's 15, so we have more of these conversations. But I do think it's about doing the best that you are capable of. You have to hold yourself to to a standard, right? Like, because if you don't, then, nobody else will. And that's kind of the message that I give to him. And that's the message that I give to young people, to young professionals, right? Like, especially, I don't want to get into the generational stuff, but, I've worked with younger people, and because of the trophies, right? Because of that, everyone gets a trophy. I think that has had implications on people who come in and work. And there's sometimes can be an expectation of receiving things that haven't been earned, right? So that's a conversation. That's a conversation as a manager that I've had to have. And sometimes they're difficult, but it's about, look, I get it. I get that you believe this, but here's what it looks like to actually earn that. And it doesn't have to be earned in the same way. It's not about years. It's about, projects, work done, accomplishments, things you can show, results. It's not about that because you're older. I'm like, it's not about age. It's about what have you done? Show me. Walking in and showing up on time is not enough. It's not, right? Like,
in school it was.
and some, it depends on how far you want it to go, right? Like,
Charlotte, I've heard that you're a radical optimist, right? And it sounds like you can manage a plot twist as well. Where does that come from? Is that learned? Is that wiring? How can we all become radical optimists, or should we?
I think we should, for sure, especially in these times. I think for me, radical optimism is survival. I think it's a combination of both nature, nurture, but I will say my dad was super optimistic. Like, he was one of these people that was like, just happy. He was like a magnet, and he was always kind of like, okay. I mean, I'm sure if back in the day, he would have said plot twist, keep it moving, right?
Yeah.
And I know this sounds crazy, but Dominicans in general are known to be very optimistic and happy people. And we would always joke, like, you go, go back to the islands, and people are like, oh, we don't have any food, or we don't have any money to really cook for tonight, but let me get a beer and we're good. And then there's still a party. They'll figure it out. Like, and that sounds facetious, but it's just like, we're happy, optimistic people, just generally, like, it's a thing. And my dad in particular, and my family, and, compared to my mom, was just always he always just looked for the good in things. He looked for what we can learn from things and how we can apply those things. And I've applied that to my life. Like, I've always been very, I was not much of a worrier, oddly, like, in general, until I became a mom. Once you become a parent and you have this person outside your body, you're like, so that was hard for me. Actually, that was a hard transition, because I wasn't used to that, like, having to worry all the time. But still, I think that I don't know, the optimism is what helps me get through life, like.
Is there anything from a career perspective, when you reflect on all the work you've done, right? All the different positions you've had and teams you've led, where that optimism was really, really helpful and powerful and a superpower for you?
Absolutely. I mean, I worked at at Viacom, which is now Paramount Global, whatever, that keeps changing. In the time that I was at Paramount, or at Viacom, about 14, 15 years, I went through, I swear, about 9 reorgs, if not, I mean, something like that. Like, every 6 to 9 months, there was some shifts, some change, small ones, big ones. And I was, at first it was hard, right? Because I was still relatively early in my career. I mean, I went there after 8 years at Latina, but Latina was such a small, different little, like, pilot. It was, it was almost like a family. So this was my first big corporate role. And I remember the first time it happened, I was like, oh my God, like, it was so stressful, and I didn't know, what to do. And then I just kind of started writing it. And I was always very like, just do my work. I'll keep doing the work, and just, I guess somebody up there is thinking that this will be better. Like, it was just the way I approached the work. And the larger my teams got, and the larger my remit got, I also approached it that way. the other side of optimism that I think is it goes hand in hand for me is this whole control the controllables. That is a thing for me. Like, and I applied that to my job and to my team. When they'd get all out of sorts, our budget would be cut or something was coming down the line. Or I was like, guys, control the controllables. Let's do the work. Let's do what we can. Let's not let all of that noise impact the work we're doing. Obviously, we have to be aware of it, but you just gotta kind of keep moving because the worry is gonna get you nowhere. Like, it really isn't. Like, it's just stress. It just causes, it's not good for you physically, emotionally. Let's try to make it fun. And I would always tell my team, I'm like, dudes, literally, we're not curing cancer here. We're selling backpacks, right? So this was at Viacom because I was in consumer products. We're selling Dora the Explorer backpacks. This should be happy. This should be worry-free. Sure, maybe the consumer products numbers down, but come on, we can figure this out. Like, it's just the way I approach leading a team, thinking about my career in general, because I'm like, there are bigger issues out there in the world that should be worried about. This is not one of them.
It's interesting you bring up reorg. I just got off the phone before starting up here today and talking with someone that's going through a reorg. It's real. I think I've probably gone through 5 or 6, and a half a dozen of those were because of mergers, right? So some sort of combination of mergers and reorgs. It happens. If you were to write a handbook of surviving the reorg? what would be some of the key topics in that handbook?
Be nimble. You have to be nimble because inevitably in reorgs, your job will change. Some version of your job, whether it's who you report to, who reports to you, where you sit, in the space. And if you're going to be one of those people that's like, but this is not what I'm used to, this is not how we did it, that right away is going to get you a mark on your back and you're going to be gone in the next one. Like, you just have to be nimble and be able to, kind of move your way through it. Be open to the opportunity because, by the way, sometimes, it's not in your master plan, but sometimes it can be good for you. Right? Like, it can be good. There was a reorg for me where I went from, I was head of international brand strategy, whatever, for licensing. And that was the best 7 years of my Viacom time. It was amazing. I traveled the world and we had a great team. I built this team. And then they were like, by the way, we're going global. And that changed everything, right? Global means adding the US to the picture. So I did everything ex-US. There was a separate team that was doing US because it's the biggest market. And there was a decision made at the very top that the consumer products, that Viacom was going to start becoming more global, which made sense. Like, when you think about it strategically, it makes sense, right? They were functioning almost as 2 separate companies with some overlap, but they were going to become more global. And that the consumer products group was going to be one of the first ones because we had some major partnerships that made sense to be global. And that within that, my team was going to be the first one to become global. So it was like all these layers. And again, in my mind, I was like, this is going to be the hardest transition ever. I mean, it was. But it made sense. Like, strategically, it made sense. It was just that I had to be in the middle of it. And I had to, do all the kind of pull together the strategy of how we were going to do this. But I think, my ability to be nimble, be open to what people wanted, but also being strong and I think confident in what I knew would work or what I believed would work made a difference for me. And again, I was more senior, so I was able to do that. So it's this idea of balancing being nimble, but also being really knowing what you know and being vocal about what you know. And then you have to get your advocates, right? You have to continue to get your advocates. And by the way, if your advocates leave, you got to go and search for new advocates because you always have to have those, right? The advocates, the mentors, the people that can kind of give you an insight. And especially, the audience for this, they're a little younger. You just always have to be keeping that in mind, right? You have to be like, well, who can I go to help me navigate this? Who can I go to kind of bounce some things off of? And if your person that you had has gone, talk to them. Maybe they have a recommendation of who else the next person is, and maybe they can help you facilitate that. Like, if you have a good relationship, they can do that. Don't stick your head in the sand. Like, you can't, right? You have to be willing, be able, offer input, depending again on the level and the type of work you do. And don't stick to your guns on this is how it was done before, because clearly it didn't work, or somebody believes it wasn't working. So you sticking to that is not gonna put you in good light, right?
Can we talk a little bit more about finding your advocates, right? So especially as you mentioned with young people, they might feel a little intimidated. They don't know how to go about it. I know that, I've heard things like, I didn't think you'd want to talk to me, right? Or you had time for me. You're so busy, because there is a presence that, more senior people have that inadvertently shuts down people who may have a different role than them, right? So what advice would you give to young people on how to, suss out and evaluate whether even that person should be your advocate?
Well, I think you have to do your research, right? Like, and it depends on the company. I was lucky. I was in a media is not, it's corporate, but not so corporate. Like I knew right away, even from coming out of college, I wasn't doing finance. I wasn't doing law. Like there are certain areas that I was like, I don't fit. I don't want to fit. I don't want to, kind of be a little bit quieter. I'm kind of like, and I wanted an environment that would allow that, right? Like that's just who I am. And I love media and I love entertainment. So it was easy for me. So I understand that this advice may not work everywhere, but I would imagine that just do some research. Like you can identify people. And for me, I was like, I want to identify the people of color, the women, and in areas that I am interested in. LinkedIn is valuable, right? Go to LinkedIn, check them out, and you can kind of have a sense, and then you create your list. I mean, really create a list. Is it by skill or department? Is it by maybe you guys went to the same school, you're from the same place, and you start there. And most of the time, in most companies, even the most corporate, if somebody more junior reaches out to them with like a well thought out email and saying, hey, I want to just ask some questions. I want to learn more about you. People love to talk about themselves. I mean, look at me. I'm like, people love to talk. I mean, they do, right? Like you get to that. I want to learn more about how you did, how you achieved what you achieved. I see a path for myself or whatever, people usually be like, oh, okay. That's not hard. I can take 15, 20, 30 minutes of my, for a coffee, with this person, this young whippersnapper, aging myself, but you know what I mean? Like to talk about it. And I think that goes a long way. Once you do those kind of preliminary interviews, you'll start seeing who you connect with. And then you follow it up and, hey, you mentioned this when we talked about, I saw this article, and you send them an article because you have to nurture it. And by the way, you have to nurture it with them at first. I think you have to do a lot of the lifting. And hopefully once they become an advocate, there's the reciprocity there. But you got to do a lot of some of the work, especially if you're the more junior person. And if they don't respond to you in a week or 2 weeks, they're probably busy. Now, if it becomes a month and you follow up, then maybe you move somewhere else, right? Like people, not everybody's willing or able to do it. Because I don't want to lie and say that some people just are not interested. But you have to try. And again, I think it's on you, and it's a lot of work. It is a lot of work. And then once you have that relationship and it's kind of, you've built it, then I think you ask those questions. Well, I am, thank you so much for this time you've taken. I really appreciate it. And the conversations we've had, I've learned that the work that you're doing really is interesting. Would you be my advocate, or, whatever the language it is, is there a project I can help you with? Is there a room, a meeting that you think would be interesting that you can bring me into just as to listen, to learn, because I want to grow. So, you think of your strategy, think of the ways that you think that within your company, there are the rooms that you can try to get in. And some advocates will bring you in and they'll say, hey, and they're proud of it, right? Hey, I'm bringing in such and such person. They really are interested in this line of work. And I think it'd be good for them to listen to the way we're managing XYZ project. And usually people are like, that's great, Bob, or Karen, bring them in, and then they're thinking, wait, where's mine? Right. And they're like, why don't I have a person reaching out to me? Right. Like, I think there's something about that as you get higher or whatever, in terms of more senior, that you should have younger professionals that are like following in your footsteps. You should want that. That's you building your bench. That helps you, I think that helps you with your boss, right? Because everybody's always looking up, right? So that's what I would advise. Do the research, follow up, follow through, because it's on you, and then be really strategic about why and how you're reaching out to these people.
Are there any mentors or advocates that helped you along, particularly in your early career, or did you learn that later on in life, like so many of us, like myself? Right?
Yeah, I think I definitely learned it later, a little later in life. I wish I had done more of it, frankly, at Viacom. I didn't do enough of it. I did towards the latter half of, I was there for so long. But there are some people that I would always turn to. I mean, one of the founders of Poderistas, who brought me into the organization that I now run, was the founder of Latina Magazine years and years ago, who I worked for. And throughout, that was a big gap of time when I worked at Latina and Poderistas, but we remained in touch. She's, a mentor, a friend, and it's somebody that I would go to and say, hey, what do you think about this? What do you advise? And would kind of give me advice. And then there have been other people, even within Viacom, that in different ways have mentored me or been advocates, including peers. That's the thing. People don't think about peer groups. I think it's important to have peers that you can kind of say, hey, especially peers, for me, peers that reported to the same person. That I would say, hey, I'm trying to figure out how to get this through. What did you do when you did that project? Tell me, teach me, because I'm having difficulty. And maybe it's a communication style. And I remember one particular person that he was my neighbor, like next door office. And I go to him and be like, please help me. I'm trying to push this through, or this is really difficult. And I think I'm hitting a wall with our boss, for whatever reason. And he's like, girl, this is what you need to do. This is how I did this project. And, thanks so much. Here's what you shouldn't say. Here's what you should say. Good. This is super helpful. Thank you. And I do it. And it was super helpful, but that's a peer level. But it was great that I was able to do that, right? I needed that. Like, you also need at a peer level, you need to be able to kind of connect. And I would say that at any level, right? At a senior, more junior, you're a young professional. They should be talking. They should be creating these little circles and saying, hey, how are you how'd you connect with your advocate? What are you doing? Any ideas? So I think it at every level, that's something that you should be doing.
Creating alliances, basically. Maybe it's not, survival island level, but creating those not only advocates and mentors, but those alliances within an organization can really make the difference in all kinds of things. Advice on what's happening today, as well as career advice in the future. And it becomes a co-mentoring relationship in the future if you nurture it, right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and the story you just shared, when you first started talking about this, that the same person that you work with at Latina Magazine brought you in. That's a full circle moment. It's those ongoing relationships that you've nurtured over time and the personal brand that you have built, right?
Yes.
You've demonstrated that over and over again in your work. That makes it easy for people to advocate for you when you're not in the room, right? To think of it.
One thing that I've said often, and I say it, and sometimes I feel, there's a level of privilege with it. And I hate that, because it's hard when people, may not have this access or whatever. But every job that I've gotten through somebody that I know. From the beginning, like from the very beginning, right out of college. And I know that's a hard thing to hear for some people, right? It is, right? Because especially people don't have access. I was lucky and I went to what do they call it? A PWI? That wasn't a terminology when I was going to school.
Right, some new terms, yeah.
Right, and I'm a very, very proud public school graduate here in New York. I went to public middle school. I went to public high school. I'm super proud of it because, I did that, and I still got to go to a school like Wesleyan University, which is, a great school, a little Ivy, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But with that comes access and connections and people and all these things. And so when I say that, I do feel like, that must be hard for folks. Like, if they go to a school here in the city, which is you can still get a great education. However, you still can network. You still can, look at your peers, and you still can do internships. And when you're doing these internships in the city, by the way, we all come from these PWIs to New York. So you're here. These internships in the city, you can do all year round. Make sure that you're connecting with people. Make sure that you're making your mark with people. Like, there's a way. It's harder. I'm not going to say it's not harder. I recognize it's harder, but there's a way to do it still. that hopefully will like sow those, plant those seeds that later on can become that network for you, I'm always impressed when I see now on LinkedIn, I see like new college graduates that they have their like LinkedIn pages. I'm like, good for that. And I know LinkedIn has come a long way, and it wasn't even around when I graduated college, but I wasn't, as a professional, I wasn't using LinkedIn effectively.
Right.
I just started really digging into LinkedIn after like I got laid off, and I was like, oh, I should be on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I was there, but I wasn't active. I have since become much more active on LinkedIn, and I'm telling people about the work that I'm doing, and I'm telling people about having been chosen for a fellowship and doing all of this. By the way, I've done other things like that. I've gotten prizes. I've never posted it on LinkedIn. It just didn't occur to me. And actually, this is another tip. I would think, oh, that feels like I'm bragging. It feels a little like, oh, like, but no, you have to promote your brand. You have to, I think you have to do it in the right way. It can't be icky, right? But I definitely, that's a big lesson that I learned very late in life, and that I tell young people all the time. What's your brand? What's the work you're doing? Of course, you never take credit for stuff you haven't done, but if you were part of a team, talk about it and talk about it in those terms. I was on the team that did this. Yes, my role was small, but I learned so much. And thank you to blah, 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 and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And that gets you exposure on LinkedIn. Like, you need to tell people about the work, because this idea that, by the way, I grew up with, and I think it's the immigrant mentality, it's the female thing, it's a lot of things. Oh, my work will speak for itself. I'll just do my work, work hard, make sure my team is happy, and my work will speak for itself. It's not enough.
No.
Nobody's going to be out there searching for you. You have to show the work you're doing, again, in a way that reflects the impact you made, that reflects the full team, that's not super icky, right? And I know icky is not very technical, but you know what I mean.
No, I totally get
that. But that's super important too. Like, tell the work. Say what you're doing, and so people know, oh, this person A is doing great work, is on a team, and acknowledge them, and B knows how to communicate it. I want that person on my team.
Right on.
Right?
Yeah.
I think that's a really important point, because I'm generalizing, which I really shouldn't do, but with the younger generation, right, there's a couple of schools of thought around social, for example, right? So when they're really into it, or you have the group that's antisocial, and they feel like it's very performative to put all this stuff out on LinkedIn or wherever. But they have to remember that the people hiring are of an older generation who have a particular mindset around how they evaluate or look for people. So you really have to focus on your personal brand, which you didn't have to do before.
Right.
In a different way, you had to do it, right? But you have to externalize your personal brand more now. And, so you just made that point that it's really important for you to put yourself out there.
It is.
Absolutely.
And I think as long as you're true to yourself, right? Like another tenet for me is authenticity. I've always been super authentic, too authentic in some rooms. But, and that was fine for me. And I knew that at some level it was going to limit me, frankly. But I was like, I'm okay with that, because I want to be who I want to be. I don't want to shrink. I don't want to, have to change who I am in order to fit in or achieve more. And again, media is a very forgiving space, right? So, which is why I think I just naturally kind of went that way. But even within media, there are corporate structures, there's hierarchy, there are rooms. And, I was in rooms, lots of big rooms with CEOs, presidents, and all of them. And there were times that I'd have to remind myself, like, it was hard. It was a hard balance. There were times that there were things that I didn't agree with. And I had to remember, Charlotte, my big lesson, even as a senior professional, was framing. How do I frame this? You can disagree, but you have to frame it. You have to bring evidence. You have to, all these things. You don't want to just be the person that's always going to be complaining, right? So that was a lot of work for me. And the thing is, I think the big message is the work continues. No matter how old you are, no matter how high in a career you get or whatever you achieve, you're always finessing, because the different rooms and the different levels require different skills. And then they're cumulative, right? So, it was interesting. The end of my tenure at Viacom, I was laid off, which was, it was the merger. Bob, you spoke about the merger. It was Viacom and CBS got remarried, as I like to call it, because when I first started the company, they were together, MTV Networks and CBS, and then they divorced a year in, and then they got remarried in 2019. And I was laid off in February. It was December 2019. I was laid off in February of 2020, 2 weeks before the pandemic. But it was time for me. It was time. It had been 15 years. I already had been thinking about, kind of my next step. But I remember after having left, leaving, and it was that first month was so harsh. I mean, it was like the decompression, the idea of like taking off this armor because again, the more senior you get, the harder it gets. It doesn't even become about the work. It becomes about kind of the management of the people, of the politics a little bit, of the vying for the attention.
Yes.
And then I don't want to say there are politics everywhere. It's not Viacom, everywhere. It has that. So, but the more senior you get, the more you have to do that. So I think for a younger professional, I think there's training ground for that. Like, this is why the peer mentorship is important. Being in those rooms to look at it with your advocate, to watch it happen, is important. Like, it's something that you have to kind of build on. And then the work to me is, how do you retain your authenticity within it, if that's important to you? Mm-hmm. That was a big value for me. I needed to remain authentic, right? And it, it just requires time, energy, effort, skill, all of the things, practice. Sometimes I got it right. Sometimes I got it wrong.
You have so much experience, and today has been just packed with lots of great advice and lessons. Is there anything we've not touched on that would be in the letter you would send the 22-year-old Charlotte? Is there anything that we've not touched on that is worth mentioning?
I think that I would tell the 22-year-old Charlotte, you can do anything. I mean, literally, that I didn't believe at 22. Like, at 22, I was kind of like, what am I doing? Will I have a job? Like, I'm not sure. I graduated Wesleyan with a degree, wonderful education, with a degree in sociology and American studies, double major. And I like to call it, I majored in fluff and fluff, right? Now, no disrespect to my sociologists out there. I mean, it's amazing. But, it prepared me for nothing specifically, right? Like, it was like, what am I going to do? My father was like, what are you doing? Like, what, you spend all this money. What are you doing? And I walked into Wesleyan a pre-med major. And then so he was like, that's something. And I walked out with a sociology and American studies major. He didn't even understand what that meant, right? But it prepared me for everything generally, right? Like, to communicate, to write, to do a cogent argument, to just kind of understand the way things and people connect. Like, that to me was like the best education, right? But I felt like, I don't know what I'm doing with this. Like, and I don't know if I'm going to be successful, that those dreams of success and all the books that I read, like, am I going to achieve it, right? And I was there, they talk so much about the whole imposter syndrome. And I don't know that I believe in that terminology, but this idea of not believing that I belonged in the rooms at the time, I was like, always not sure. And when I think about my career, it was a series of, you can do this, like the college tour. And I was like, okay, I'll figure it out. I did it, and, we won awards and did the thing. And then I wanted to leave Latina because I was like, I was successful there, but I wasn't sure that I could do it somewhere else. Again, the doubt. I wasn't sure. I want to make sure. I want to test that I can do what I did at Latina and be as successful somewhere else, in a place that didn't feel like family. And I went from Latina to Viacom. But the only reason that I even applied for the job was because somebody had to kind of convince me. I was like, there's this job that somebody told me about. But I'm not sure. I looked at the job description. I was like, I don't know how to do that. And she was like, Charlotte, when you do this, you do this. Like, literally, she walked through all of it and connected it because it was in licensing. I was like, I don't even know what licensing is. I was like, she's like, just go for the interview. And I went for the interview. And the guy who interviewed me, I'll never forget. Michael Dresner. He's still in licensing. He was like, here's a book. You can figure out licensing, but you have the transferable skills. Like this, that's what, you did. Again, he kind of helped me with that. I was like, okay, I was hired 15 years later. But even within Viacom, I got this assignment. They asked me to do this assignment. I went from the domestic Nickelodeon group to the international group because the head of licensing was like, hey, we need somebody to come in and do this international role for a year. The woman who does it is based in London. She's going on maternity leave, but we need somebody quickly. And licensing, the brands, you'll figure out international, which by the way was the understatement of the season. But I was like, she showed me the job spec. I was like, there's no way. My husband was like, you could do this, just do it, figure it out, but my big lesson was like, I always just did it. Like I took the leap. And there was no grand plan. And now I run a nonprofit. I've never run a nonprofit before. I'll figure it out. And I'm figuring it out still every day. So my letter would say, you will figure it out. You have everything you need to get anything done, except operate on someone, obviously. You can figure it out. Like you have the skills that you need to figure it out. I call myself a utility player. I can figure it out. I can make it work. That's what my letter would say, I guess. And you will face hard things and you will get through.
Okay. Do a quick wrap, because I was like this. Okay, it wasn't really right. It wasn't really right. Okay. Hold yourself. This is what you said. Some tidbits, Charlotte, of what you said. Hold yourself to a standard. If you don't, no one else will.
Love it.
Be nimble and be open to new opportunities and be strong in what you believe will work. I had to figure out my chicken scratch. Get your advocates, and if they leave, find new ones. I think that's really important.
Yes.
And remember, peers can also be part of your advocate group.
Yes. And make a list. Be organized.
Yes.
Yeah.
Be true to yourself, even if you think it might limit you, and figure out how to maintain your authenticity in various environments. You can disagree, but just don't complain. Bring evidence, bring facts, frame your argument.
Frame it.
And I'm just going to repeat what you said at the end. Be a utility player. You can face hard things. You will face hard things and you will get through it.
And one last thing, if I can tag on to that wrap up, is define and promote your brand. Defining your brand is hard. I jumped into that exercise years ago. It took me months to figure out, what do I want my brand to be? Right. What is my brand today? What do I want my brand to be? And then map the gap, and then putting a plan in place to define the words and the actions to define the brand you want to be. Right. Define it and promote it. I think that was fantastic advice. Charlotte, do we have time for rapid fire questions?
Sure.
Okay, so rapid fire, nice crisp answers, but as Karen and I always say, if there's a story, we'll take it, right? So rapid fire, but if there's a story, give it to us. What was your favorite subject in high school?
Math. Any math.
What was your least favorite?
Except for physics. I was like, right, physics, math, right? Whatever. I was like, where are the numbers? Or was like, there was one that I was like, was math, but there were no numbers. I was like,
What was your least favorite subject? Was it that?
Physics.
Yeah. What's the best advice you've ever received?
The best advice I've ever received was be nimble. Be nimble.
Yeah. On the flip side of that, is there some advice that you're happy that you did not embrace? What's the worst advice you've ever received?
I think the worst advice is this idea of keeping your head down and just doing the work, which I did for a little bit. And then I realized, wait a minute, nobody knows what I'm doing. Like just kind of stay under the radar because you don't want to be lost. And I don't think that's the right way to avoid the reorgs. Like stay under the radar. I was like, it's not about staying under the radar, right?
Yeah. And then my favorite question, and we usually wrap with this, what's your why? Why do you do what you do?
I have a lot of whys. What's my why? I thought I prepared for that. I always think about me being a young girl and thinking I want more, and not more materialistic, it's just more experiences. Like I it's funny, I did this is a little bit of a story, but I did this exercise. I had my birth chart read, and it was all about what's your purpose in life, right? It was like a big deal to me. I was like, what is my purpose? I don't know. What came up for me, and I thought, that is it, is this idea of wanting to experience things. Like, I am very curious. I've always been a person, anything, like, I'll get time out in New York. There's a new park that has trampolines. I'm like, ooh, let's go. I'm the one that's telling my friends, let's try this new place. Let's try this new experience. I'm all about experiences in the small, large, and it feeds me. So that's my why. I guess that's why I'm always these opportunities I've said yes to, because I'm like, it's a new experience. It's something new for me. I get bored. I get bored easily. So I need new stimuli. Like, I just need new stimulation, people, experiences, places, things to do. I'm one of those kind of people. I can't be like digital marketing director. That would bore me to tears. Like, I need the big picture. I've always been like a big picture person, but that's because the big picture gives me opportunities to experience different aspects of the same problem or the same challenge or the same project, and get to see it from the different angles. And I think it all connects for me that way. So my why is, I want to be able to be on my deathbed and say, I experienced everything that I wanted to experience. I mean, I know that's ambitious. Right. Or at least I was open to it,
well, never say you can't do it. Say you haven't done it yet. And
I haven't done it yet.
Right. And it will be delivered. Charlotte, thank you for everything you do for so many people, leading so many organizations and being a mentor and advisor to so many, and being part of Momentum Now and supporting MVP. We truly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. I feel like we just scratched the surface of who you are. There's so much more, but it has been a pleasure. And I'm now going to rewatch my birth chart video, because I did it, but I need to do it.
Well, thank you both so much for the lovely questions and conversation. I appreciate it. It was fun. I hope your audience finds some nuggets within.
Absolutely. A lot of gems for the pocket today. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Thanks.